Buongiorno, hello everyone. I welcome you to this film discussion about Un Nemico che ti vuole bene, or in English, A Beloved Enemy by director Denis Rabaglia. My name is Stephanie. I'm with the Consulate General of Switzerland here in Vancouver, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today as we celebrate the Settimana della Lingua Italiana nel Mondo. Italian is one of the 4 official languages of Switzerland, spoken by roughly 8% of the population, predominantly in the south of the country, in the cantons of Ticino and Graubünden. And this movie we talk about today is very much also a Swiss-Italian movie. It was co-produced by companies in Switzerland and Italy. It was filmed in locations in both countries, and also the director, of course, is a Swiss-Italian dual citizen. And this event very much also is a collaboration between Switzerland and Italy. I would like to thank our partners, the Consulate General of Italy in Vancouver, and also the Italian Cultural Center who helped us set up and promote this event. Thank you very much. I unfortunately have to excuse the Consul General of Switzerland today. Andreas Rufer, he had to excuse himself on short notice. But in his name, I would also like to welcome every one of you who takes part in this event today, and also thank our partners for all your support. But we do have the pleasure to welcome today the Consul General of Italy, Fabio Messineo, and I would also like to invite you to say a few words. Fabio Messineo, please take the stage.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to welcome participants to this event. As you may know, this year marks the 20th birthday of the Week of the Italian Language in the World, an initiative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy, which was launched in 2001 to promote Italian language throughout the world. Actually, I think it's more appropriate that I continue in Italian. Buongiorno a tutti. Ogni anno, la terza settimana di ottobre, vede la realizzazione in ogni angolo del mondo di migliaia di manifestazioni culturali tesa a promuovere la diffusione e la conoscenza della lingua italiana. È il più importante appuntamento per celebrare l'italiano ovunque sia coltivato, amato e studiato. Ogni anno la settimana si arricchisce di un tema diverso che nel 2020 vede coinvolto il mondo del fumetto e delle graphic novels. Come in molte edizioni del passato, anche quest'anno il nostro Consolato Generale ha accolto l'invito del Consolato Generale elvetico a presentare insieme un film, essendo la Svizzera, come ha detto Stefani, il paese che ha l'italiano tra le lingue ufficiali. Quindi saluto con molto piacere, anche se non è presente a distanza, e ringrazio sentitamente il Console Generale di Svizzera in Vancouver, Marina Bettaglio, per l'organizzazione di questo evento, la professoressa Bettaglio e il regista Denis Rabaglia, che vedo, che ha magistralmente diretto il film Un Nemico che ti vuole bene. Complimenti per la scelta del film, perché mette, secondo me, in evidenza alcune cose che accomunano Italia e Svizzera. Da una parte, ovviamente, la lingua, poi la bellezza dei nostri paesaggi, da una parte quelli svizzeri alpini, ricordiamo le Alpi sono quelle montagne che ci uniscono, e dall'altra parte quelle marine pugliesi, i paesaggi marini pugliesi. E la sintesi, secondo me, è quella bella immagine di quel treno che va da sud al mare alla montagna. E poi un'altra cosa che da sottolineare è che il regista Denis Rabaglia è doppio cittadino, è italo-svizzero. Tornando alla settimana della lingua, il Consolato Generale collabora con la società Dante Alighieri, con il locale comitato Dante Alighieri, che è stato un fondatore della settimana della lingua insieme al Ministero degli Esteri, e con gli amici della Dante abbiamo 2 giorni fa presentato una conferenza con il maestro Carlo Fierens sull'influenza dell'italiano sul linguaggio della musica. E poi in collaborazione con UBC e SFU, la Camera di Commercio e il Centro Italiano, abbiamo anche sostenuto un concorso per gli studenti universitari nell'ambito della giornata del lettore. Quindi vorrei ringraziare tutti questi attori, il Consolato Generale Svizzera, la Società Dante Alighieri, e UBC e SFU, il Centro Italiano e la Camera di Commercio, perché abbiamo potuto organizzare questi eventi online con tutte le difficoltà tecniche e logistiche di questo momento. L'italiano è la lingua più studiata del mondo. Pensate, nel scorso biennio più di 2 milioni di studenti hanno studiato l'italiano in oltre 120 paesi. To all of you who are not yet able to understand Italian, let me just say that learning Italian will give you privileged access to understanding our culture. There are many opportunities to study Italian online, and taking a language course is a great way to fight boredom and sadness in times such as this. Non voglio togliere altro tempo, che so che è molto poco. Grazie a tutti, buon proseguimento.
Grazie.
Grazie. Thank you very much, Fabio Messineo. Let's get to the film discussion, and we have a moderator here with us today, which I would like to introduce to you as well. It's Dr. Marina Bettaglio from the University of Victoria. Hello, Marina. She is an Italian born and raised in Genova, and today she is an associate professor for Hispanic and Italian studies at the University of Victoria. She will first do an interview with Denis Rabaglia for about 15 minutes, and afterwards we will open up the floor to every one of you so you can ask all your questions, discuss everything you want to discuss about the movie. We will use the chat function to organize your questions. So if you look at your Zoom screen, at the bottom you find a little speech bubble with the words chat. When you click on there, a window opens, and then you can write your questions in there and your comments. If you do not feel comfortable writing in English, you can also write in Italian. We'll be able to translate. Okay, thank you very much. And with this, I give over to you, Marina.
Thank you so much. Buongiorno a tutti. Good morning to everybody, or, good afternoon or good evening. And for those who join us from other parts of the world, it's a real pleasure to be here and to talk to Denis Rabaglia about this really amazing movie that we enjoyed so much because it kept us on the edge of our seat for the entire movie. We didn't know how it was going to finish. So it's one of those movies in which the attention of the public is guaranteed, because it's really not the kind of movie that you know where it's going and you have a clear sense, oh, there are these cliches and it's obviously going to end up like this. And so one of the things that I would like to ask the director is actually about how did he decide to focus on this story? Because before I looked more deeply into the movie, when I was watching it, the first thing that came to mind was the novels by Gianrico Carofiglio, who is a noir writer, crime fiction writer from Bari. And his first novel is called Involuntary Witness. So there's the protagonist in Un Nemico che ti vuole bene is an involuntary witness as well. So at first I thought, well, perhaps there's a link to Carofiglio, but it would be really interesting to hear the story, because sometimes we literary and film critics tend to impose our readings on either literary or cinematic works that are based on our background rather than on the true story that the director is conveying. Yes, Denis, I cannot see you. There's so many little squares.
I think, Denis, your microphone is off.
Yes, you see me?
Yes.
You see me?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Everybody,
Yes.
hello, good morning, everybody. So this is really cool to be able to speak to you. So as you can tell from my accent, I am French speaking originally. I believe I have the classical Canadian French accent, haven't I? Thank you very much for all these nice introduction and everything. So let me get immediately to start to answer you the question about the origin of that story. If you look at the credits, you would see based on a story Italian, da un racconto, based from a Polish director. So the story goes like this: that story, the film you saw for about the first 25 minutes, that is mostly until the killer comes back and sort of make the proposal, and that was true. That really happened. That really happened, not in Italy. That happened in Georgia. So Georgia, not the American state, but South Caucasus.
Yes.
where there is a very, very active mafia. The Georgian mafia is, you know, very, very prominent. So what happened, it was exactly that story. Some guy who was a doctor, actually, you know, going to his countryside, house, blah, 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 finds a guy, takes care of the guy, and the guy says, okay, but disappears a couple of days, not the morning after, like in my film, but like a couple of days after without telling, and comes back a month after and tells him, well, I'm a killer. I'm going to kill somebody for you because we all have an enemy, and blah, blah. And that story really occurred and was told by this person who, you know, this Polish director called Kieślowski, Zanussi, excuse me, Kieślowski is the other one. Zanussi was a very important Polish director. I mean, before, he won an Academy Award for Best Foreign Film in '76. So he was a very important person also because still under Soviet times, he was kind of running the local studios, protecting the other directors, speaking French, you know, so he was kind of a director, but also an ambassador between France and Poland. So I was in Tbilisi. Tbilisi is the capital of Georgia. And I was at the Sheraton Hotel with Zanussi. And we were doing a workshop. And he comes back at night, 11 at night, and he says, Dennis, I have this extra, I can't do the accent. It's a fantastic accent, but I cannot do it. You know, he says, I have a fantastic story. So he tells me the story I just told you. Said that, so the person had told that story at dinner so that Zanussi makes the film. He says, this is master, they call him master, you know, master, please make a story of my film. And so we had a drink with him, and I mean, he doesn't drink very much because he was the official filmmaker of Pope Francis, you know. So he's not a big drinker, as you imagine. So we did share a drink, and then we started to imagine what would happen if the person would accept the proposal, or what would happen if the other one would insist. Because in the real story, you know, he's insisting, but after a while he's just disappearing. And then I left it there. And thinking he's going to go back to Poland, he's going to make a film about that, because that's his story, so to speak. And then about 5 years later, that's 2004. I think in 2010, I was sitting with a screenwriter in Rome, and we were looking for a story. We read books. Actually, I believe we might have read the book that you mentioned.
By Caro,
you know, a material like we read like 50 books. Which were noir Italians, and something to adapt. And then I started to tell that story, and I said, and my colleague said, but Dennis, that's the one we have to do. And I said, yeah, of course, but I mean, that's not my story. That story was told to Master Zanussi, so he's supposed to make the film, not me, not Denis Rabaglia. Said, see if he has made the film, tells my colleague. So I called Krzysztof in Warsaw, and Warsaw, and I said, did you make the film? No. Can I make the film? And he says, yeah, you can make the film. I'm giving you that story, you know. So there I am. Then with my colleague, we started to find, in a way, the equivalence, you know. And that's where all of a sudden the guy is from the north, the killer is from the south, you know, and but everybody's in Puglia because in university everybody's kind of living everywhere. So we're starting to sort of implement, and we created the story basically from the moment where he's seducing the daughter, you know, until the moment he's seducing the daughter. It is pretty accurate to how the story was told to Zanussi. From that scene on, it becomes our story.
Yeah, because it's very interesting also the fact that Puglia has become a more and more cinematographic region, with movies like Mine Vaganti by Ozpetek. It in English was translated as Loose Cannons, but that is made in Lecce. It's shot in Lecce. But it's really interesting to see how the story kind of unfolds, and there's always this interplay between these oxymorons, right? The oxymorons, the contrast of two concepts, like the enemy that loves you. And it's all played around contrasts.
Yeah,
right?
indeed. I mean, that's what I look for all the time. You have the big fat guy and you have the thin one, like the dog and the cat. You have the Switzerland with the snow, and you have the south of Italy. You know, you have the women blonde and the women brown. You know, I always like to try to integrate as much as I can contrast, because it's a very contrast is a cheap way to make good filmmaking, you know, and in the sense that if you choose two different things and they sort of get together but they're in contrast, then immediately you have a picture coming out, you know, whether it's a landscape, whether it's a face, you know, immediately you have, like, I mean, we know that from Laurel and Hardy, you know.
Yes.
It's a very simple tool from filmmaking, and I use that often in the film in different ways, in colors, in that, and because immediately you get something. There's nothing more that annoys me than a film where mostly everybody looks the same, you know.
Yes.
And you kind of wonder, is it the step? I saw that guy, you know, and then you go on the location and it's kind of, was it the house of this one, or, you know? So I mean, I'm slightly making a little bit of a caricature here because my colleagues are smarter than that. But I certainly use a lot of contrast, and here definitely the couple and Enzo.
Yes.
Salvatore, which, by the way, Salvatore means
yes.
the one who saves you in Italian, you know. Salvare is saving, you know. So, you know, that was clear when I had Diego, because I had Diego first. I knew that I needed to have an actor which had to be very, very smart and very subtle, because Diego is such a big thing, you know. So to make him, you know, sort of thinking like, oh, what happens here? You know, you needed somebody ultra smart, you know, some guy like John Turturro, you know, these guys that are like Steve Buscemi, you know, these guys that are, you know, you don't know who they are, you know. So I was looking for an actor like that. And luckily I could find Antonio, you know, who had been in Gomorrah, the series. And he's such a subtle actor, and I just love the way he's doing, because he's enigmatic, he's charming, he's dangerous, he's a bit everything in the film, you know. But to tell you the truth now about Puglia, and then we can move on. It was only on the last part of the film that we decided to go to Puglia, because there's money there to shoot also. Into Canada, there's tons of money to shoot anywhere in Canada, so I can speak about that. Originally, the story happened between Trieste and Malta. There was no Switzerland involved. Why? Why? Because in Trieste, you have a very important institute of
astrophysics.
Astrophysics. So, you know, and it's a dark city. It's a very beautiful city, but a bit of a sad city. So it was fitting very well the mood of that character. Was kind of at the end of this bourgeois life where everybody's kind of, he thinks he has control, he has no control, whatever, on whoever is there, you know. So we felt that's an interesting feeling. And the Malta was because we need to have the priest to be as far as possible.
Yes.
You know, because that's a key element.
Yeah.
The fact that the real bastard in this film, the real enemy that they're all looking for, is actually the one that nobody's thinking about, you know, is linked to this Italian adaptation, in the sense that my understanding was that, you know, if you show the film to an Italian audience and you tell them there is a guilty guy somewhere, they'll point out everybody but the priest. If you say the same story to a French audience, they'll point out immediately the priest, because of the mentality. So I was building that story thinking nobody's going to think about the priest, you know. But then, of course, when you find out that it's the priest, you have to understand. So this is the dinner scene, you know, when they kind of talk and they think, because that's the wonderful thing about Italian, being in Italy, is everybody's imprecise, you know. So people say, oh, but he has a parish there at the north. He's been from the family for 20 years, you know, but nobody knows the parish that he has, because it's already 300 kilometers, and that's much too far away to know the name of the parish, you know. So by having the priest in Malta, I was sure nobody in Trieste would know exactly where he was, what would be the whereabouts. So when my producers called me and they say, we've got to go to Puglia because there's no money in Trieste, but there's money in Puglia, I said, okay, well then, I have to, I have to change, So Trieste becomes the starting point. And I said, let's finish then in Davos, let's finish in Gstaad, let's finish, north, because also over there, the Italian people would sort of think this is all Switzerland. They wouldn't think, and they wouldn't be able to identify. And that's how we made the decision, so that, it was believable that for that family who are all intellectuals, yet this priest is too far away to really understand what kind of business he does between Brazil and his parish, So that's how we do. And then, of course, you have the chalet. There's a party, and they are there and there's the chalet. In the first script, they were on a hotel, and it was a yacht, and there was a party on the yacht, But as we all know, the people who can afford a yacht in Malta are the people who can afford a chalet in Gstaad. They are the same people, So the switch, in a way, was easy to make, and still paying off in terms of contrast.
Yeah, it's also really interesting, the actors that you chose, like Diego Abbatantuono, for the generations of Italians who are now like our age in the early 50s. We grew up with a very different Abbatantuono. And when I was an adolescent, I would have never imagined that I would end up seeing Diego Abbatantuono as a professor of astrophysics. Right? But he plays the role well. And I was talking to people who had never seen a movie with Abbatantuono, and they were saying, "Oh, he's perfect for the part."
But that was an effort for him. That wasn't easy for him. And I'd be honest, there was a lot of material that he shot, which he was kind of going over the line, And we had discussions, as much as you can have a discussion with Diego Abbatantuono. And at the end, I was shooting a lot and different versions, and we were able in the editing room to give a very composed and sort of round performance that he himself was surprised of, because he was trying things sometimes, not always, but because of course, if he had done it always, it wouldn't be the film you saw. But often he did things, but then sometimes after takes 4 or 5, he got a bit tired. And then he got like, okay, let's do a more simple one, because as being a comic, he's a comic actor.
Yes.
He's always into looking for an effect on his audience, and he knows so well his audience. I mean, just for the people who don't know him, this is an actor who did more than 120 films, and 85 to 90 as the principal actor, as the lead character. I mean, this is massive. This is a guy who's been, 3, 4, 5,000 days of his life on a set as a star, and behaves as such, as and for him, the director is not really counting. He's, it's a bit like, the director is a bit like the guy who puts the camera out before me for the performance, and he knows very well if you move the camera just 10% on the left, he knows the result on his face. If you go lower or later, he has done it so much that he has this instinct, which is good, because if you do a good work, he also knows you're doing a good work because he's been around, He doesn't have to look at the monitor to know what happens. He doesn't have to, he knows if an actor, you bring him an actor, if he's good or if he's not good, He knows. You can't bullshit him,
Yes.
But like most of those actors who have been sort of, always surrendered by directors that are kind of slaves and so happy to work with him. It's difficult for somebody who's not entirely on that line, And but he was very happy. His wife loves this film. She says that it's the best film he did in the last 15 years. So I think I'm okay for a while, because she thinks these last films that he made are just totally horrible, but not that one. So.
Because it was interesting to also see Sandra Milo, who we used to call her La Cetella because she had an ad for these pickles called accetelli. So she was really, you know, there was this association with this kind of character, and we see her. But another thing that I thought was very interesting, that in a sense gives us a lot of information about the movie, is the food. The food as a symbology in the movie. For people who don't speak Italian, the rabbit, coniglio, in Italian we say, sei un coniglio, you are a coward. So putting the rabbits down, or like we understand more about the character of Enzo when he makes pasticciotti and nobody eats them. And, you know, they are kind of poo-pooing his homemade pasticciotti. And that's when we really get a sense that in that family, he's like the least important character.
Yeah.
But it's such a good touch that, you know, with such, with that detail, we understand how the family dynamic works.
Well, you know, that I'd be very honest, there's a lot of details that my co-writers, or maybe sometimes Diego, put into that film without even me knowing, you know. At least, I mean, I know them, but I wouldn't actually know the exact meaning because I understand the language, but I don't live there, you know. So I had a lot of people around me and I was always double checking, you know, those things. But on the other side, the fact that I would always focus on the story and not so much on that, on those elements, that gives me some sort of freshness. And since I never get trapped into a line that is funny, but I just don't get it because it refers to something I don't understand. And I always make sure that you guys who don't know the Italian culture, and I would say in this case, even the Italian, this is more than the Italian culture. This is about the Italian culture from the north and versus south. There's a lot of that in the film, a lot of that, you know, and this is as diverse as it is from people from Vancouver and Montreal, you know. I mean, it's as diverse as that, you know, and you may think that very diverse. So there's a lot of those things, but at the end, you know, it's about it's about the fact that, you know, in the end of the day, it's about the fact that, you know, nobody really knows what are the people around you, or how the people around you, what kind of good really they want for you, you know? And I don't know how to express it, but I'm sure you're following me. So, you know, and I believe that this feeling of, I think there's always a moment in our life, all of us, where we think, oh, we thought this person I makes my life with, my husband, my wife, this boss that I work with, they are my friends, they want me good. And then you find out they won't want you good. Whether they're right or they're wrong, that's another issue. But I think none of us can escape this moment. And it's very different for everyone. And the film is about that. It's ultimately, you know, it's about this moment where you have to revisit everything, you know, the people who are really around you, the people who are a little bit further away, like is Claudio, the guy with the star, you know?
Yes.
And, you know, and then ultimately, what I found moving, and I hope you find it somehow moving and funny at the same time, is having this character who's kind of have to sort of, you know, he's arriving at the big hotel and he's kind of saying, well, you know, all right, I got it all wrong. You were entirely right from the beginning. But then what does he do in the last act of the film? He's retaking possession of his destiny, you know? He's rearranging things, you know? He's saving the guy who was supposed to save him, so to speak.
Yes.
And he's going back to the family and clarifying the field. So from the state of the eternal victim, you know, the last act of the film, you know, with his brother, and then with the killer, and with the two killers, I mean, the two other cousins, you know, he's really reshaping his world in a very modest way, in the sense that he's ending alone with his son and nobody else, but in a, you know, he reaches some truth somehow, a truth that he could not reach before, even though that's the same countryside house, it's the same sculpture, it's everything is the same as the first pictures, but it's not the same, you know. So I thought, for especially for a generation like the one you mentioned, that is above 45 and something, you know, this is a film that can at some point, create compassion and empathy with what happened to the character, but also bring a bit of hope that, you know, you can get over, not talking here about the disease here, I'm talking about, you know, people who are really harming you by mistreating you, basically, you know, but there is a way for all of us to retake power of our life and hopefully even do some good around us.
Mm-hmm. And can I ask you as the last question before we open the forum, why did you choose a university professor?
Well, we always felt, again, it's the contrast, you know, you have an extremely intelligent guy, this killer, very brilliant, but absolutely working class, totally working class. I mean, you are an Italian speaker, you know that his accent comes from the exactly right neighborhood.
Yes.
Where the people, where the young boys are being created and
yes.
they became mafia killers.
Yes.
I mean, and the story that we make fun of with, which is two cousins that are kind of overseeing, that is completely truthful. Make no mistake. This is not comedy. That's the way it works. They pick up the guys. If they know that these are good shooters, they watch them out and progressively they initiate and they are there for the first killing. And if the first killing doesn't happen, they go, all right, no worries. But the whole system until the real killing, the first killing will happen. So that part of the backstory of the killer, doesn't matter how charming I presented that, you know, is totally truthful. So I needed to have a contrast, you know, I wanted to have two bright people, you know. So if you have a very bright person, but coming from a kind of a working class, and I can say in that respect, disadvantaged background, you know, it was interesting to have somebody who was so far away from the reality. And astrophysics is just so far away from reality. It was also a metaphor of himself, because he's in the stars. L'uomo delle stelle, the man from the stars, that says his brother. You know? So we didn't choose, it was clear that it had to be, it could move around the way he wanted to do. It was nice if he would be teaching. So, I mean, it could have been another job, but, you know, the university professor was, it was a bit gray. Also in Italy, they're all a bit gray, you know, because let's face it, if you're a top level professor university in Italy, that means nobody offered you another place, nobody else, well, because it's not a place where people are, except in some capacities, there's maybe 10 of them faculties in Italy that are linked often to, architecture or history, where if you are there, you are really there. But for a lot of science and scientifics, we use a lot in Switzerland for the CERN. A lot of Italian scientists, you know, working abroad is really key, you know. So this guy was kind of half average, you know. So there were different reasons for why it was all working, you know. Sometimes you make very precise choice and you think about it and even do research, like the thing with the killer, where I read documents about, you know, the education of killers in the mafia, and then made it as a comedy, as I explained. And sometimes you just make choice completely intuitive. And, you know, you look around at your co-writers, your producers, and everybody goes like, yeah, that works.
You know, it's interesting because in Canada, when we see the golden Rolex watch, no, I mean, especially in the humanities, nobody could ever buy that watch. You know, it's an indication of the corruption and also of a system that is so different from what we have here. But it's there's also like the Berlusconesque kind of aspect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. which now has become somehow something a little bit of Trump. I think, you know, I see Trump as a kind of affiliation at times from Berlusconi. You know, that's not funny, but sometimes funny as well. You know, so.
Thank you so much, Denis. I think it might be time to open the floor so we can
please.
some questions, and I see that some people.
Yes, we already have quite a few questions. Maybe I looked through it a little bit while you were talking, Marina, and maybe I'll give you the first question we have here from Kali. Kali asks you, Denis, in your mind, was Salvatore really planning on killing someone for Enzo, or did he feel that he may never even get the guts to do it? Was it a bluff or not?
Yeah, that's a very important question. Thank you very much for asking that. First of all, we hesitated for a long time in the process of the film whether this guy would be or not be a killer. You know, did he really kill somebody, or did he never kill nobody? That was like for many drafts. There were pros and contras for that. So finally, you know, we came to the conclusion he would never have killed, and he would be an apprentice. But remains the question, which is not entirely solved in the film on purpose. Why does this guy, as an apprentice and who has never killed anybody, why on earth is he making that proposal to this professor? I mean, okay, he owes him something. He owes him, yeah, okay. But still, he's making the hell of a proposal for somebody who in the end has not killed anybody. I think you can follow up my reasoning or our reasoning. So there was the option to make it more clear in the film, and I decided not to do that. I decided not to do that, not because I don't know, but because sometimes I think that, how can I say this? If you do a film where 100% of the things is perfectly explainable, you have all the elements, then, in the worst case, that becomes kind of a soap opera where everybody understands everything and, there's nothing. Your imagination is not working. On the other hand, if you make a film where only 20% of the things are really clear and the other 80 is really complicated, and you start like some David Lynch films, then you lose audience in the way, So between something very boring or very, I don't want to say TV because now TV is changing, but very boring, very predictable, where everything is clear, and something completely out there, something completely obscure, that's a spectrum, So I always try to leave a couple of elements a little bit hidden, because my assumption is that if the work works fine, the actors are, then the audience thinks, they say, oh, I understood that. I didn't understand that. It must be me. I must think about it. Because since I understood the rest, that means the director knows what he's doing. Because if I don't understand anything, then I don't think about anything, But if he wanted to give me that thing a little bit in the dark, then maybe I have to do my own way, So to me is the explanation, which is not in the film. So if you have not read that, it's normal. But the explanation that we gave to the actor, and we decided with the actor, is that he knows he doesn't want to kill people. He knows that he has to kill them under the surveillance of the mafia. So he's trying to set himself a territory where he can see if he can try it or not finally before rebelling to the mafia. Do you follow he's sort of saying, okay, I'll try to see if I can do that without them around me, if it changes anything. And therefore he needs, and instead of just killing somebody because he's a moral person in the end somehow, then it's best to kill somebody who really is a bad guy. So let's look for a bad guy that I don't know, that has nothing to do with my world. And maybe I'll kill and we'll see how I react. That's kind of the subtext or the backstory that we created. But then again, none of them is meant to appear in the film.
Thank you. And I see a number of other questions. For instance, how difficult and how long it took to actually prepare financially to do the film?
Yeah, it's exactly what Pascal said. Hello, Pascal. Bonjour. Bien. He's a good friend of mine living in Vancouver, so it's cool to have him here. It took me exactly 8 years. Yeah, it exactly took me 8 years. You know, from the moment I called the Zanussi in Warsaw, to the Piazza Grande or the release that is even 9 somehow, 2010, including the whole 2018. That's kind of 9 years, yeah. The financing was entirely linked of Diego. Nobody wanted to make that film because it was too unusual. But the moment Diego wants to do the film, then everybody wants to do the film.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And you know, that's a very opportunistic world somehow, you know. And I've done most of my films on the principle of having a leading cast who's following me, and it was always the same story. Nobody wants to do the film, and when the cast comes on board, everybody wants to do, which means also that if the lead cast, the bankable cast, so to speak, leaves the boat, then nobody wants to do the film anymore. Yeah. That's other directors have other logic because they manage to either the kind of films they do, or they go via prestige in festivals. So, or because of the box office that they did before, they may go for an unknown cast and do whatever they want almost. And others are, you know, but it's never been my model because I don't do festival films. I don't do films that are meant to be in Cannes. Hopefully, because I think that they'll be very, very far away from Cannes if I made them. So I do other things, and therefore those films I need to have a bankable cast on board. Nothing happens. I have a lot of people being interested in my projects, but nothing happens until I have bankable cast. So the moment I have bankable cast, things are happening very fast because they happen according to what the bankable cast is bringing, which is, first thing is availability. Those people are available from that to that. So then the entire machine, which was still and dead and silent for years, then you got to do everything. Tomorrow we're shooting here, you go there, boom, 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 and the whole thing becomes alive.
Then we have a question from Joseph, who asked that it's interesting that one of Salvatore's cousins confuses astronomy and astrology, which is kind of also a way, I think, to show that they are, you know, from working class background, and those two concepts for them are very similar. So then it asked.
Yeah, this wonderful monologue that he does when he's taking them into, you know, he says, you know, everybody has a place in the universe, you know, and so this guy is at the wrong place, just like my brother is at the wrong place. Why don't we just put everything together? You know? I haven't created everything in that film. I have to be honest. There's a lot of moments that were created by Diego. There were scenes that were created by Diego and by my colleagues. But some of those more metaphorical moments, I wrote them because that speech, for instance, I wrote it. You know. Not the things before, for instance, which were so Diego was very funny because, you know, as an instinctive actor, he was rearranging the blah blah in his own way to make it better or to make it his own. But when the phrases, when the lines were really like sharp and they had to be delivered so that, you know, the story moves forward, so that we understand, he wouldn't touch them, you know. So you would have all these rewrites and all these suggestions, but they were always in the fat, you know. They were never on the bones. On the bones, he never changed anything. It's not entirely true. He changed one thing in the bones, but that's a longer story than this conference that we have. But conference call. But he did change something, and I was never happy with that change. But I couldn't change that much. But the rest, he was always, you know, keeping the story, but just doing things in a different way, you know. So that's where you really have to know, okay, it's not my words. It doesn't start the same way. It doesn't do the same move. It doesn't exactly do what I want, but somehow he's telling the same story. And it's the same pieces of the puzzle that belongs to the whole thing, you know? It doesn't have the color, but it's got the shape.
Thank you. And it's also interesting the fact that certain sentences, certain speeches that the professor gives in front of his students, he has to learn the true meaning by talking to killers.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly,
The
exactly.
same ideas to his students for many, many years, and they remain abstract. But then when he's talking to killers, then those words actually gain.
Yeah, then all of a sudden there is something there, you know, and then yeah, it's the trivial and the sublime, you know.
Yes.
So you know, I personally that makes a project, that makes a film which is a little bit smarter than your usual comedy, but
Yes.
it doesn't make it an intellectual film that pretends to, you know, achieve something in terms of bringing, you know. So, you know, for an audience who like the big fans of Diego, you know, this is too sophisticated for them, you know,
Yes.
so to speak.
Yes.
For most of the big fans of Diego, at least those who are stuck, because Diego also has lost a lot of his audience, got tired, you know, of him doing always the same thing, like most comedians, you know. There's this thing. But I mean, for those, it's the unusual Diego, and they need, you know, it's complicated for them to catch up, you know. And for the other ones who are looking for films that have more, that you know, they're not genre films, and you know, then this film is just a black comedy, you know. So my films often fall in between on purpose, and therefore, you know, I'm filling a gap of people who, you know, don't want to have the usual mainstream entertainment thing, but on the other hand, they want to be entertained when they see something, you know. So that's where my films are, you know.
Yeah, and that's why it's so refreshing, because like Abatantuono and San Dramilo, we categorize them in the Commedia all'Italiana, no? This is, which is stereotyped, and you kind of know how it's gonna end. But this is so refreshing because you have no idea how it's gonna end, and there's always these twists, and it's funny, but it also makes you think. We were thinking about the fact that in the end, when they are at the train station, you see the MOB, which reads mob. So if you are in an English-speaking setting, you think, oh, look, the mob. Yeah. And I see other questions about, does reacting to workshopping, funding, location, etc., affect the director's original coherent vision? I think that you've touched.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it would be a lie to tell you that the film you saw is the exact film that the film I had in mind. First of all, I had different films in mind as we progressed. It was first a real noir, which means then created another problem because, you know, where the killer was a real killer, and it was really about him being betrayed by his brother. So in a way, it's the same story, but as a dark story. So that story couldn't do Diego. Diego couldn't do it. Yeah. So when I chose Diego, I knew I had to choose, because I had the idea. We were always looking for an actor who's like this kind of gray, thin professor, you know, like the classical university. And we couldn't find one. And we couldn't find one. Nobody wanted to do it, more precisely. And then I had this vision. I said, why don't we just go the other way? You know, why don't we just take the big, you know, the coloss, the big thing, the guy that you believe it's not possible that this happened. You know, I had exactly the opposite. And everybody said, that's a very good idea. But we knew that as a result, we had to do a comedy. So the first change was there. And then the second change came from everything that Diego is an ironical actor. So it was difficult not to have him ironical all the time. And it would depend on the moment of the day. And it would depend on his own. It would be less ironical than when he had another guy when he wanted to show up like a competition between comedians, like the scene with the priest in the church.
Yes.
Originally, that was more serious. That was more serious. Like, that was like, you know. And then because this guy is another comedian, then it became a war between who's funnier than the other. And it turned out like a complete cabaret thing, you know. Every take was different, you know. And so then what you saw is a composition. So then at that point, the director, you just go very much in the back and you just say, go on, another one, another one, another one. You change the camera and then you go like, I'll do it in the editing, you know. So then you can't change the color, but you can take the best bit of that, because most of what they were doing was, you know, not usable. So because he's ironic, it was, faceva fatica. It was difficult for him to let me come into his inside person, in his inner being, with you know, I always said I want to, you know, he hated the fact that I had glasses. I asked him to put glasses, you know, because, you know, I wanted to have his look all the time, and he didn't like it because he wanted to be a body. He didn't want to be a look, you know, and I was always there catching his eyes and catching the movements. And when we edited the film also on that. You know, I work very much with the eyes of the actors. For me, they're really key, the eyes. And so yes, the film has been changed now. And yes, it is not the film that I plan to make. But is this film that you've seen telling a different story than the film I wanted to tell? The answer to that is no. It is the same melody, but arranged differently.
Erika asked, do you think Diego would have accepted this role earlier in his career?
No. I think right now his career is doing so-so. The films he did before were more like the traditional things, and they weren't working. So he was also looking, as often it's the case, for other material in his career. So that came at the right point. Unfortunately, this film didn't do extremely well, so that didn't change him. But he did after that a very dramatic film, which I have not seen, with Salvatore, which is the director
of Mediterranean
to the world via Mediterraneo. But that film was a disaster. They told me that, you know, he couldn't, you know, because he's got now there was a moment, I believe, like 10, 15 years ago, where he did a couple of more serious films and more serious parts, for which he got a lot of credits. And then he stopped and doing the other things. And he has tried with my film to come back to that. And it has worked in terms of prestige and people recognition of his, you know, in the profession and in the press and all that. But for the audience, it's kind of it's a misstep.
And again, Pascal asked whether it would be possible to have the movie in platform like Netflix, so we could have access to it.
Right now it is, I believe it is on Netflix and Amazon Italy, because it's not because you're on Amazon and in Netflix that you're necessarily all over. It depends on the rights. So it's the Italian rights. So right now, you know, we haven't been, you know, the way the rights are handled, I cannot answer to that question. No, I cannot say that, because there's a couple of streaming platforms in Switzerland, but then again, they are geolocalized. So things have not entirely changed yet with respect of the film business we had. You know, it's still a territory business that is linked to, unfortunately, linked to rights. But it might happen, something I don't know exactly, it might happen that the Netflix or the Amazon, then if the film plays well in Amazon and in Netflix Italy, then they kind of sort of buy more rights. But will they buy world rights? I have no idea. Or will they only keep like a couple of territories? That's even more obscure than it was before, because before you would ask somebody and they will tell you, well, your film has been sold for that territory, blah. Now with Netflix and Amazon, they just pay. They don't tell you anything.
Mm-hmm. So that really changes the distribution of.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And I wanted to make sure I was not missing any of the questions. A question that I don't know whether we can actually answer. For what reason the Swiss and Italian consulate chose this film. I don't know whether we can ask, well, we certainly cannot ask the director.
Maybe I can quickly reply to this. Of course, because it's a brilliant movie, please. That's the reason. No, of course, for the Settimana, we're looking for a Swiss production, ideally Swiss-Italian, that is in Italian. A production, as you pointed out, Dennis, a movie that is both entertaining and maybe light, but at the same time meaningful, right? We don't want to have too much of an artistic movie in order to discuss it afterwards. It's always easier to have something you can more easily relate to. So that was also a reason why. And this movie, I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, is very beautiful because it brings together the language across the borders, right? This Italian, Swiss-Italian production, that was also a big reason for us.
Thank you. And then somebody asked, Suzanne asked, how long will the film be available for streaming?
I mean, we got from the production company in Switzerland, we got the Vimeo link that you all had. And the idea, of course, is that you watch it now before the discussion. So if you have to be quick with this one. I don't know when exactly they're going to take it down. But if you want to watch it, if you haven't done it yet, then let's do it quickly, yeah.
I'm going to assume that they kept it at least for the whole week of the Settimana. That would make sense, hopefully.
Yeah. We didn't agree on like an end date, but yeah, I don't know. Let's see how fast they are. I don't think they're going to do it on the weekend, so I think you're fine.
No, because a lot of us saw the movie. I mean, I watched it a couple of times, obviously, but with my partner, just on the way to the university, we were saying, we'd love to see it again. And, you know, we don't know how we'll be able to. And, you know, I think it's also the kind of movie that it would be nice to show to students because it breaks that sort of dichotomy that it's almost always present in Italian cinema. Either is light and silly, or sometimes is really heavy. And, you know, it's really nice to have something that gets them to think, gets them to look at stereotypes, think about different regions in Italy. It gives a lot of elements to think about from, you know, the perspective of people who teach Italian as a foreign language.
Well, I think you're summarizing also what most of my colleagues in Italy think. They are very puzzled because this is very Italians in the details. You know, you cannot say this is made by somebody who's not Italian, who doesn't understand Italy, who sees this like a cliche place. You know, because it's very well rooted, the accents, the details, the flair and everything. And yet, because of the reasons you said, you know, they realize that none of them would have done it like that. Yep. So it is somehow a film not made by an Italian, but to a degree of authenticity that is puzzling for them, you know. We have to remember also that Il Postino, The Postman, which is a film that I believe we all know and we all love, wasn't quite understood by the Italian cinema. It's a Michael Radford film, a British writer, British director. But this actor was a massive star, and it was his last film. He was dying. But you know, Il Postino, for the Italian colleagues of mine, is a little bit of, you know, and it's a masterpiece for the rest of the world, you know, because they realize that it is a way that's not a fake film, but it is not made within the same tradition of the Commedia all'Italiana or whatever it is in the case of the Postino. I certainly do not compare my film to the Postino, please. But I mean, you know, it's a strange experience for most of my colleagues to see this film in Italy, because they realize it's all Italian and yet there's something not Italian for them, you know. Whereas for you, it's made and it probably looks totally Italian, you know, and it's not wrong.
Well, for me, it's, you know, it's different if I look at it as a professor of Italian who wants to show the movie to my students.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
or
sure.
if I were to watch the movie back home in Italy, right? Yeah. And I think that it's the kind of movie that can generate a lot of discussion. Also, the stereotypes, and I really like the fact that throughout the movie, there's hints of what is going to, you know, at the end you think, well, this makes sense. It makes sense that he's a fake priest.
Yeah.
The way
yeah.
he gives a lot of kind of hints. When the scenes when he's confessing his niece, and he says, well, the physical aspect is important. And you're thinking, no, you're supposed to, you know.
Yeah, it's you know, it's it's just starting to, you know, tell a film should be enjoyable at different levels, you know.
Yes. Hopefully
somebody from Italy who's looking for something of a less silly comedy enjoys it very much, and hopefully people who love Italy and tries to understand this wonderful and complex culture can read it, you know. And hopefully some people who are, you know, really, you know, struggling with what the mafia is doing, they can say, okay, well, for once it's a comedy about the mafia, but it's not a ridiculous comedy.
Yes.
It has a background. You know, it's properly rooted in a reality. Turns out to be a little bit comedy, but it's not a ridiculous thing, you know. So, you know, you try to for me cinema is that is what cinema is about. You know, it has to address, you know, you never quite manage to do that, but, you know, as many possible people, but, you know, there are different readings of the same film, and one should work on the possible readings. You know, I'm not interested to have the same reading as the director. I would like to have my reading, and I would like to have subsequent readings than the one who's sold to me.
And perhaps, I don't know whether we are concluding, because it's already.
Yeah, sure, we should.
Pascal asked, what's the next project?
A question of honor. Okay, I'll check out the other Denis. A question of honor. What is the Italian name? I'll find this out. Well, next film is. I have a TV series on a feature, and the feature is on something that you know Switzerland for, which is the famous Dignitas thing. You know, the fact that you can come to Switzerland and when if you're really sick and die, you know, do assisted suicide. You know,
Yes.
I'm sure you're pretty familiar with that. And so this is a British film. Actually, it's a British old lady. And she's kind of escaping because she can't do it in the UK. But the problem is that she has motor neuron disease. But the problem is that she's making the documents that she's giving to Dignitas, she's lying about some aspects of her family, not to have the family, and she's lying to the family. She says, well, I'm just going for a couple of days. She's not a terminal state. But if you have that disease with Dignitas, regardless of the state, they will allow you, because that's known as a disease that has no escape. So the comedy comes from the fact that she wants to do that, but she's actually lying to everybody. And the moral of the film and the struggle is that she has to come to terms that she has to tell the truth also to her own family. They deserve the truth, and they deserve, it's not because she's sick and she has the right to go that she's entitled to do and misbehave. And it's the classical eccentric old lady, the kind of Maggie Smith, you know, character, you know, this kind of character. So this kind of stubborn, you know, so it's the story of a character who needs to, a bit like this one in a way, an old character who's learning how to cope with and with the others of her own kind, but on a very late stage, in the sense that the film actually is staging the assisted suicide. So it's a 3-generation film. We have the granddaughter, her daughter, and the grandmother. So it's a three-generation story, and between the UK and Switzerland. And hopefully it will show how those things are also made in Switzerland. They are extreme. The procedure around that is very strict. the free will. There is no money involved, like what people are saying. And yet you're supposed to be authentic and truthful. And if you're not, the process is kind of posed. And because, it's based on mutual trust. And this old lady has never trusted anybody in her life. So, that's what she's going to have to learn in the last 3 days or 4 days before she can go peacefully. It's called butterfly. It's called butterfly stroke because she used to be a swimmer in butterfly. And she always said, "Oh, I should have been to Tokyo '64. I could have been the Olympic Games." She was kind of thinking. She never made it to Olympic Games, but she was kind of, and the entire family was always under this thing that, she could have been. And she was a good swimmer, but she was not quite that level. But she always made everybody believe that she could have done it. So so Butterfly Stroke is the film. So hopefully, I'll manage to attract one of these old delightful British actresses that we all love, and I won't spell any names since this is recorded. And if I do, it will be the same story. If I don't, the film won't be made. And if I do, it will be the same story as with Diego. I can get the film made, and maybe I'll have the chance to speak with you again. Who knows?
That would be great. And I think with this peek into the future, into your filmography future, we conclude this event. Thank you very much, Denis Rabaglia, for being with us today. It was a pleasure to have you. And
thank you, all of you, for your questions. Fantastic. Thank you.
And also thank you, Marina, of course, Marina Bettaglio, for moderating the event today. And thanks for everybody who joined in and asked their questions and gave us their comments on the movie. And if you're interested to follow us and to maybe be part of the next event we have coming up, you can see our upcoming events on our website, the website of the Consulate General of Switzerland in Vancouver. We also have a newsletter, so you can also subscribe and then always get the latest information. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Grazie mille, saluti a tutti.
Grazie, arrivederci.
Arrivederci a tutti.